When German soldiers surrendered to the Allies during World War II, they expected the worst. Nazi propaganda had drilled it into them. American captivity meant starvation, humiliation, even death. Many believed they would be treated the same way prisoners were handled on the Eastern Front, freezing in open camps. No food, no medicine, no mercy. But what actually happened shocked them. Instead of torture chambers or starvation huts, German POWs in America were introduced to something they hadn't experienced for years: hot showers, clean beds, and even a fresh cup of coffee in the morning. And for thousands of prisoners, this was the biggest shock of the war. By 1943, German POWs began arriving in large numbers to the United States. More than 370,000 Germans were shipped across the Atlantic and distributed to over 500 camps scattered across the country. Imagine the fear. Long journeys across the ocean, surrounded by armed guards, no idea what was waiting on the other side. Some thought they were headed straight for prison mines or death camps. Instead, they found fenced compounds with barracks, kitchens, and modern plumbing. One of the first things many German prisoners wrote about in their diaries was the showers. For years on the front, hygiene had been a nightmare. Soldiers often went weeks without washing. Lice and disease spread quickly. In Russia, freezing temperatures made even simple washing impossible. So when they were marched into a shower block in an American camp, turned the handle, and felt hot water pour over them, it was like a miracle. They were given soap, towels, and clean uniforms. Some described it as the first time in months they felt human again. For Americans, this was standard sanitation. For German POWs, it was an unimaginable luxury. Then came the barracks. Instead of sleeping in frozen trenches or on straw, prisoners found wooden bunks with real mattresses, pillows, and blankets. Many camps even had heating for the winter. German POWs later recalled how strange it felt, lying down in a clean bed, under a roof, with no artillery thundering above, no fear of bombs at night. For men who had spent years on the Eastern Front, this was beyond belief. One recalled, "It was the first time in years I slept through the night without waking in terror." But perhaps the biggest surprise came at mealtime. American camps were required by the Geneva Convention to provide rations equal to U.S. soldiers. That meant 3 meals a day, with meat, bread, vegetables, and yes, even coffee. Imagine the scene: German prisoners lining up in a mess hall, being served hot meals on trays, eggs for breakfast, soup or stew for lunch, meat and potatoes for dinner, and every morning, steaming cups of coffee. For many Germans, coffee had been rare even before the war. By the 1940s, it was almost impossible to get in Germany. Suddenly, they were drinking it daily in captivity. Some POWs joked that they ate better in America than German civilians back home. And in many cases, it was true. The surprises didn't end there. Inside the camps, prisoners received medical treatment. Doctors checked wounds, treated infections, even offered dental care. German soldiers who had been suffering untreated injuries for months suddenly found themselves in clean infirmaries with bandages, medicine, and nurses. To them, it felt surreal. The same enemy who had bombed their cities was now fixing their teeth and healing their wounds. Life in the camps followed a strict but surprisingly humane routine. Prisoners woke up, washed in the showers, ate breakfast, and were often assigned light work, farming, repairing roads, or helping in local factories. For this, they even received small wages, which they could spend on cigarettes, candy, or writing supplies. After work, they had free time. Some played soccer or volleyball. Others joined classes, learned English, or painted. And every night, they returned to clean beds, warm blankets, and quiet. For German POWs, this was more than comfort. It was a direct blow to their worldview. Nazi propaganda had told them Americans were brutal, greedy, and uncivilized. But here they were, being treated with respect, fed properly, even given coffee and books. The contrast with their own army's treatment of Soviet prisoners was staggering. Millions of Russians had died in German camps from starvation and disease. Yet here in America, German soldiers were eating steak and eggs. It was a revelation that shook many to their core. Life in captivity wasn't just about sitting behind barbed wire. The United States believed prisoners should contribute to the war effort, so German POWs were assigned to work on farms, in sawmills, repairing roads, or even in local factories. But here was the twist. It wasn't forced slave labor. They were actually paid. Each man earned small wages, which could be spent at the camp canteen. Cigarettes, chocolate, writing paper, or even extra food were available for purchase. For men who had lived through rationing and hunger in Europe, the idea of earning money in captivity was almost unbelievable. Some later said they ate better and lived better in American camps than they ever had during the war. Sports became another unexpected part of daily life. Soccer fields were built, and tournaments were organized. Guards and prisoners sometimes played together. Imagine a German corporal and an American sergeant running side by side on the same field, laughing after a goal. Just months earlier, they might have tried to kill each other on the battlefield. Baseball was also introduced to the Germans, along with volleyball and boxing. For many POWs, these games brought back a sense of normal life, of being young men again, rather than just soldiers or captives. Many camps also offered classes. Libraries were stocked with books, and prisoners could study English, math, or history. Some even learned trades that later helped them rebuild their lives after the war. For men drafted straight from school into the Army, this was a rare chance to continue education. A few prisoners later used these studies to enroll in universities once they returned to Germany. It was another shock. Their enemy was not only feeding them, but also teaching them. Perhaps the most emotional moment for many POWs was being allowed to write home. Under the Geneva Convention, prisoners could send letters to their families, and in America, this rule was respected. Thousands of letters made their way back to Germany, assuring wives, children, and parents, "I am alive. I am safe." In a time when cities were being bombed and families torn apart, those letters meant everything. For many prisoners, it was proof that they hadn't been forgotten. The biggest shock was the contrast. German POWs had seen firsthand how their own army treated Soviet prisoners. Starvation, disease, death by the millions. Now, they were living in camps with hot showers, warm meals, and football matches. The hypocrisy was not lost on them. One former soldier admitted, "We realized we were treated more humanely by our enemies than we had treated our own captives." It was a devastating realization, one that many carried for the rest of their lives. By 1945, Germany lay in ruins. The war was lost, and POWs were gradually repatriated. For many, leaving the American camps was bittersweet. Home meant bombed cities, destroyed infrastructure, and food shortages. Some admitted they didn't want to return. Life in captivity, strange as it sounds, had been safer and more comfortable than life waiting for them in Germany. When they finally went back, they carried stories that shocked their families, stories of hot showers, coffee every morning, and medical care from the enemy. The story of German POWs in America is a forgotten chapter of the war. It shows that even in the bloodiest conflict in history, there were moments of humanity, moments that completely overturned expectations. For the men who lived it, captivity in the United States wasn't just survival. It was the shock of being treated as human beings by an enemy who had every reason to hate them. And sometimes, that was the most unforgettable part of the war.